It's December 7th, 2006. In Australia, it's launch day for the Nintendo Wii. In northwest London, a tornado swept through Kensal Green. Police in Phoenix, Arizona had just announced they had the baseline serial killer in custody. And 350 miles west, in sunny San Diego, California, George Vaccaro was writing his first blog post, in which he was about to begin a 5-day-long battle to get his phone carrier Verizon to understand very basic mathematics. This is his story.
Take care of you from here on out, okay?
Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Trent. Good evening, George. How are you doing this evening?
Great. Except that I've been trying to resolve this for 2 calls in over 45 minutes now.
Okay, well, let's see what we got here. I'm definitely sorry to hear that you've had a call on that many times. Let's see. Looks like you're requesting some kilobyte usage that was done while in Canada.
Well, let me just start out with a basic question.
Okay.
Do you recognize that there's a difference between $0.002 and $0.002?
You'd be forgiven for feeling insulted by such an elementary question at the beginning of a phone call, the difference between dollars and cents. But if it was elementary to the Verizon customer service team, then George wouldn't have already gone through nearly an hour of telephone rigmarole before getting to talk to Mike, the supervisor, and deciding it'd be a good idea to get this call on tape. Here's George's problem that the Verizon customer service reps have hitherto failed to understand. George is a Verizon customer who had the unlimited phone plan in the United States. However, he recently spent time in Canada and knew he'd have to pay a different rate during his time across the border. Before crossing the border, he called Verizon's customer service to figure out how much he'd have to pay for voice and data while in Canada. The customer service rep told him the rate was 0.002 cents per kilobyte. Since George has the unlimited plan in the United States, he doesn't have a point of comparison to determine if this rate is cheap or expensive, but he is surprised by it and asks the rep to confirm that the rate in Canada is indeed 0.002 cents per kilobyte. The rep confirms the rate, and George, seemingly uneasy about this, has the rep note this quoted rate in his account. With this quoted rate on record, the stage is set for Verizon's unforgettable blunder. During his time in Canada, relieved by the affordable rates, George uses 35,893 kilobytes of data, which is charged on his bill. At the quoted rate of 0.002 cents per kilobyte, one doesn't need to be a mathematician nor a unit analysis expert of any repute to calculate George's bill. When we do the multiplication, the kilobytes cancel out, and we're left with an amount in cents. Grabbing a calculator to run the numbers, George owes 71 or 72 cents. But Verizon didn't charge him 72 cents. No, they charged him 100 times that. 100 times the rate they quoted him. How could they make this mistake?
$0.002?
Do you recognize that there's actually...
0.002 cents.
Yes, do you recognize there's a difference between those two numbers?
No.
Well, that explains it. Somehow, everybody involved in communication with George up to this point doesn't realize that dollars and cents are different. Of course, they'd never say exactly that, but to think $0.002 and $0.002 cents are the same is to equate dollars and cents. Imagine being George in this situation, where you wonder how you could have possibly been charged 100 times more than you expected based on what Verizon told you. Then you call them, and every customer service rep you speak to thinks dollars and cents are the same. But somehow, George maintains patience, hopeful that every new person he gets on the line will be Verizon's very own Isaac Newton.
No.
Okay, is there a difference between $2 and 2 cents?
Well, yes, there is.
Okay, so is there a difference between $0.002 and $0.002 cents?
$0.002 and $0.002 cents.
Yes. Is there a difference between...
They're both the same if you look at them on paper-wise.
No, they're not, actually. Is $0.5 the same as 0.5 cents?
It's $0.5.
Is a half a dollar...
That would be 50 cents.
A half a dollar, is it the same as a half of a cent?
No.
Right.
So a half of a dollar is different from a half of a cent. George has got the Verizon rep to concede this ground, yet it seems the only reason this point was clear to the Verizon rep is that lack of decimals and maybe the word of. Throughout this and the, believe it or not, other 2 calls we have recorded on this exact same issue, the different Verizon reps will repeatedly have an odd hang-up on the decimal expression of the rate, excluding the units, how it looks on paper-wise. Feeling some progress, George starts to explain the issue.
What I was quoted was .002 cents. That's 2/1000ths of a cent per kilobyte.
Okay.
And I specifically asked the rep, I said, are you saying it's $0.002 or .002 cents? Because I recognize that there's a difference. Just like there's a difference between half a dollar and half a cent. There's a difference between $0.002 and .002 cents. Your rate in Canada is .002 cents.
At this moment, George realizes how tricky this can be to talk about. He can say the rate is .002 cents, and the Verizon rep will agree. But having received the bill, George knows the actual rate is $0.002, a rate that is 100 times higher, but which is not apparently different to the Verizon reps.
Correct.
Well, okay, it's not true. It's $0.002. You're still quoting me .002 cents when in fact it's $0.002 per kilobyte. So if you want to charge me .002 cents, I'd be happy to pay the bill. The problem is I was charged $0.002 per kilobyte.
Okay.
It's interesting how much the tone and delivery adds to the comedy here. George has just clearly explained the issue and has received a completely stagnant K from the Verizon rep, who is still unable to perceive a problem. Now, the Verizon rep will ask George to get a calculator, and it's perhaps at this moment that it sinks in with George that these people have no clue what any of the numbers actually mean.
So if you take, okay, do you have a calculator with you?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, take this 7179.
Yep.
And divide that by 35,893. That should come out with .002.
Yes, and what units should it be, dollars or cents?
Well, it's per kilobyte.
Right, and is it dollars or cents per kilobyte?
Well, let me take a look here for you.
It will be 3 minutes before the Verizon rep is able to find the roaming rate in Canada. George sits silently on the line for 50 seconds before once again explaining what rate he was quoted at before his trip, and then reiterating where the confusion is.
So, my point here is the confusion is on your side, the first rep I spoke to, the second rep I spoke to, and including you, in calling $0.002 .002 cents. That's 100-fold difference. Just like $1 is 100 times different than 1 cent.
Mike doesn't understand this and doesn't respond. A minute passes before he reports the rate.
National roaming access coverage in Canada is .002 per kilobyte cents.
Can you say that again?
Is .002 cents per kilobyte.
.002 cents per kilobyte. So you just quoted me again. Your price is .002 cents per kilobyte.
Correct.
Okay, so now I'd like you to translate my 35,893 kilobytes into dollars for me, if you would.
Okay, so if you take .002
cents, remember, it's cents.
The fact that George insists on inserting the unit as soon as the Verizon rep neglects to mention it tells you he knows exactly where this man's calculations are going.
Cents, remember, it's cents.
times 35,896 is $71.79.
No, that would be 71 cents.
Yes, this is why your teachers make you write out your units. When you're doing calculations, the units don't just change to what you expect them to be. The speed of an automobile is sometimes measured in kilometers per hour. It's like miles per hour, but less intuitive. If your vehicle travels at a rate of 500 meters per hour for 2 hours, You can't just multiply the rate by time, get 1,000, and put kilometers because that's the unit of distance you expect. The unit of distance you calculated, if you pay attention to the units, is meters. The difference is a factor of 1,000 that's buried in the units and will be forgotten if you confine your entire thought process to button presses on a calculator.
Because you started with a rate per cent and you multiplied by the kilobytes. So that would be 71 cents. I'll tell you what the problem is here, is you're the original person I spoke to before I used my airtime, and up to including you, are quoting $0.002 per kilobyte as if it's 0.002 cents per kilobyte, and they're not the same. So I assumed that you guys knew how to do math. No offense here, but I assumed that you knew the difference between 0.002 cents and $0.002, and it sounds like there's still some confusion about that.
There is, and it's not going to get any better. George is confounded by the Verizon rep's inability to recognize a 100-fold difference between their quoted and actual rates. He then attempts to emphasize the importance of units with an example.
I'll give you a brief example. If you're selling your car and I said I'm going to give you $20,000 for it, and I showed up with 20,000 pennies, we're not speaking the same language. If you quote me 0.002 cents, it's not the same as $0.002. So when you just did the math, 0.002 times 35,893, you came up with 71 cents. You didn't do the translation from cents to dollars, which would be you'd have to divide by 100. So then you get $0.71, 71 cents. So I do understand, even though it seems like maybe you don't, that the rate is, I now understand, $0.002 per kilobyte. But that was not what I was quoted, and that's not how I used my airtime, because I thought it was cheaper than it actually turned out to be, because I was misquoted.
After giving this clear and simple example, which doesn't penetrate the mind of the Verizon rep whatsoever, George further detailed the importance of Verizon's error. He's being charged 100 times more than he anticipated, and this problem is exacerbated all the more because his high phone usage was a result of him thinking the rate was a very low 0.002 cents per kilobyte. George proceeds to give the Verizon rep more details of his prior communications about this issue, noting how he even went as far as to have previous reps note the quoted rate in his account. So there's no question about whether or not he misheard the rate. He heard it correctly. He was given information that was off by a factor of 100. Since Mike, the Verizon rep, can see this, George is hoping the issue is now apparent. But what he's forgetting is Mike's qualifications.
Can you please write that down in the notes that you quoted me 0.002 cents?
Mm-hmm.
And she did.
Right, and I see that. I see not only one, but I see several reps that have put it in here.
Right. So I hope, it sounds like you may not actually see what the problem is yet, but...
Well, I've been working here 2 years, sir, and I've been a supervisor for almost a year and a half.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going by what is documented here in the system.
Right. So, can you tell me then if the rate is, as you quoted, 0.002 cents per minute per kilobyte, and I use 35,893 kilobytes, how much should I be charged?
By the way this is calculated, $71.79.
You did your math wrong. That's what I'm saying. Is you bring up your calculator.
I've got the calculator in front of me, sir. If I type in 0.002 and multiply by 35,000,
but here's the key. I know, but here's the key. What does the 0.002 represent? Cents or dollars?
It's cents, sir.
Okay, 0.002
so
cents.
Basically, you're paying 0.2 of a penny.
If it wasn't clear before that Mike hasn't the faintest idea what he's talking about, it certainly is now. He has, in only a few words, said both that the rate is 0.002 cents and 0.2 cents.
There's a difference between 0.2 cents and 0.002 cents. They're 100 times different. So which is the real rate?
0.002, sir.
0.002 what?
Cents per kilobyte.
Mike is not able to understand this. After George, patient as a saint, tries to clarify his point a little bit more, Mike passes him off to the floor manager, a woman named Andrea, who will be the next person incapable of engaging with the issue beyond computers and calculators.
This is Andrea. I'm a manager on the floor. How can I help you today?
Hi, I think we've got a terminology and mathematics problem going on here, and it seems very basic to me, but I think we're just having a problem because of the numbers involved.
Okay.
Just to summarize, I was quoted, before I entered Canada, I was quoted 0.002 cents per kilobyte.
Okay.
And just so you know, I have no context for how much you guys charge for data because I have an unlimited plan on the States. So I don't. Someone had mentioned to me I should have known that what it was because of what I pay in the States. But I get unlimited usage in the States, so I don't have any knowledge of that. 0.002 cents per minute is what's quoted to me. My bill reflects $0.002 per minute.
What do you mean $0.002?
Yeah, he already knows this call, just like the others, is going nowhere. But a righteous man has to try.
Okay, I think I have to do this again. Do you recognize that there's a difference between $1 and 1 cent?
Definitely.
Do you recognize that there's a difference between half a dollar and half a cent?
Definitely.
It's interesting to note that George is refining his expository ability, as the last time he went through this sort of reasoning, he started his comparison with $0.5 in cents. Now he's beginning with 1, and then stepping into the fractions with the 0.5 example. Andrea follows along, so surely George's final point is going to land.
Then do you therefore recognize that there's a difference between $0.002 and 0.002 cents?
No.
This phone call is taking place about 5 years after the premiere of Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy 3, the episode of SpongeBob that spawned this infamous meme format of someone agreeing with obvious premises but rejecting the necessary conclusion. And never have I seen a joke spontaneously come to life like this meme just did in this phone call.
No.
No.
I mean, there's no $0.002.
Of course there's.
There's
It's too...
0.002 cents is what you're quoted, and that's what I do show that you paid, or that, you're paying for the kilobyte usage.
George will not, in fact, be paying for his kilobyte usage, neither $0.002 nor 0.002 cents. But we're still a ways from his happy ending. It seems apparent that this phone call is going to be even more hopeless than the last.
Okay. I don't know a better way to express this. $0.002 is the same as 0.2 cents.
Okay. Well, what would $0.002 look to you?
It's
Obviously, a dollar is 1.00, right?
Now, the issue I previously mentioned about the Verizon rep's fixation on the decimal representation of the rates rears its head again. A moment ago, it seemed Andrea rejected even the concept of $0.002, saying there is no $0.002. However, she then said George is quoted $0.002 cents. So perhaps she just meant there was no $0.002 anywhere in the records. But her next question does make it seem like the concept of $0.002 is, to her, an enigma.
So what would a $0.002 look like?
I don't know.
I've never heard of $0.002. $0.002
It's just math we're talking about.
It's not a full cent.
That's right. And
Okay.
that's right. And 0.002 cents is also not a full cent.
But you were quoted $0.002 cents, not $0.002.
That's correct. But what I was charged...
0.002 cents is $0.002.
It's difficult to imagine what Andrea thinks the significance is of this sentence. $0.002 cents is $0.002. On one hand, it's an infuriating sentence, as it screams units don't matter. Dollars, cents, cubic meters, years in prison, .002 is .002. On the other hand, it seems like the reps are attaching a dollar sign to the beginning of every decimal, 1, without acknowledging that they're doing this, and 2, without changing the decimal expressions to account for the dollar sign. I argue this is happening because 1, saying 0.002 cents is 0.002 is meaningless, but saying 0.002 cents is $0.002 is meaningful. It's wrong, but it's clear what's attempting to be expressed here. Just like I might say 5 cents is $0.05. The second piece of evidence this is what's happening follows.
002.
Dollars?
No, that's .002.
You gotta hear this. .002 cents is 2 1,000ths of 1 cent. I'm teaching math here.
I mean, I'm trying to get what you're saying here, but it's just not.
Here's the. Let me cut to the chase.
I already talked to a few different people.
Let me cut to the chase.
Well, explain to you that you're being billed .002 cents, and if you take
I'm not being billed
on your calculator, it shows you that it's.
No, it doesn't. I can do.
We never said that you're going to get billed .00002 cents.
That's right. You said I was going to get billed .002 cents per kilobyte, and I'd be happy to pay that. Now, why don't you bring up your calculator?
Yeah.
Take .002, and we're talking about cents, right?
Right, .002. If we multiply that by the amount of kilobyte usage that you have,
35893.
35893, that comes out to what you paid, 71.79.
Cents. You never did the conversion from cents to dollars.
Because we're talking about cents. We're going to multiply the amount of cents by the amount of kilobytes that you use. Not dollars. Nobody's mentioning anything about dollars.
Let me start over here.
Did anyone mention anything about dollars? I would have liked to hear George push her on this more, because she just said the calculation comes up to 71.79. She didn't state a unit, but since she doesn't see a discrepancy between this number and what George was billed, it's clear she means dollars. So yes, somebody did mention something about dollars. She did.
Let's just say, hypothetically, that your rate was 1 cent per kilobyte, right?
1 cent. That would be .01.
And now it's clear. She insists on expressing everything as a decimal with a dollar sign in front of it, but without acknowledging that there is a dollar sign in front of it. If she thinks 1 cent is .01, then what on earth does .002 cents even mean, since she insists on decimal expressions having dollar signs? When she says .002 cents, it seems like she is envisioning dollar sign .002 cents, which doesn't mean anything. I'd be confused too. Ultimately, the issue for the Verizon reps seems to be the decimal point and the unsaid dollar sign. George doesn't realize they see every number with a dollar sign in front of it, and the reps think a number following a decimal point has to represent cents. Unfortunately, George's current line of argument isn't going to go anywhere, precisely because he allows this detail of 1 cent being written as 0.01 to be largely glossed over. He doesn't acknowledge explicitly that they have just converted to dollars, which really isn't necessary, and is only making things more complicated since the quoted rate is in cents. But let's hear George continue to try explaining the concept of .002 cents.
.002 cents. If you, in pure mathematics, it's the only way I can express this. .002 cents is 2 1,000ths of 1 cent.
Okay.
Right?
So it's less than a cent, right?
It's very much less than a cent.
Okay.
So 2 1,000ths of a cent. So let's start with 2 cents, just like we started with the 1 cent.
Okay, why are we doing 2 cents? We need to be doing .002 cents.
George now realizes that even when an adult has the mathematical aptitude of a second grader, trying to walk them through the mathematics at a pace appropriate for a second grader comes across as patronizing.
I guess my point is that we quoted you .002 cents.
That's right.
If you write it down as decimal .002. So all we
no, it's not. This is what I'm saying. This is
.002 and multiply.
This is where you're wrong. I don't know how to make this any clearer. Let's try this. Write down 1 cent. How do you write down 1 cent?
.01.
How do you write down half a cent?
That would be .005, I'm assuming.
.005, I'm assuming. This is the language you use when you know the person you're talking to knows more than you do.
Okay.
That was right. I don't know. I'm not a mathematician. All I'm telling you is I can tell you that with the calculator.
Yep.
And we take the .002, as everybody has told you that you've called in and spoke to.
Yes.
And as our system builds.
But you said .002 cents. Why don't you just write it down on a piece of paper? You have .002 cents, not dollars. .002 cents.
Understandably, you can feel George's plea coming through his voice. Won't you please just not use a calculator? Just write it down, look at the numbers, and let me explain the units to you, because the calculator cannot give you the answer. The calculator can only give you a computation which every customer service rep is failing to interpret correctly. George again tries to explain the issue, but Andrea tells him the computer knows best, and everybody agrees with it, except for him. Her explanation for this difference is enough to make you fall out of your seat.
You guys are quoting $0.002 as if it's cents, simply because there's a decimal point involved.
We're not quoting $0.002. We're quoting .002 cents.
Oh, God. Honestly.
I mean, the computer is calculating the figure here.
I know it is.
We are calculating.
It's a terminology issue.
The same thing except for you.
.002 cents is different than $0.002. I'm being charged $0.002 per kilobyte. $0.002 is 2/10 of 1 cent.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's obviously a difference of opinion.
It's not opinion.
The amount that you're billed for the data usage is entirely correct.
Okay. Well, you know what? I'm going to post this recording on my blog.
It's a difference of opinion. And her opinion is that George's bill, which is 100 times higher than he was told, is correct. George says after he posts it to his blog, maybe Verizon can learn some basic math. He, frustratedly, continues telling her what they're getting wrong and, with an immortal fighting spirit, gives yet another basic example to illustrate that yes, in fact, units matter.
It would be like, another example, half of a meter is very different than half of a centimeter. Half of a centimeter is written 0.5 cm. Half of a meter is 0.5 m. They're two very different things. You can't just say 0.002 m equals 0.002 cm. They're 100-fold different. The problem here is that you're not even acknowledging now that there's a difference between 0.002 when you're talking about dollars and 0.002 cents. My assumption was it was 0.002 cents because that's what you told me, but it's been calculated on my bill as $0.002 or 2/10 of a cent per kilobyte, which is different than 2/1000ths of a cent per kilobyte.
Okay. Well, again, we're not going to be able to make any adjustments to the bill because it is correct, and I do apologize if there was obviously miscommunication or misunderstanding in explaining that to you.
Okay. Is there someone I can escalate this to?
By the end of the call, George had been trying to explain that $0.002 and .002 cents are different to adults with jobs for well over an hour. Andrea said the bill was correct, even though we know that it was wrong by a factor of 100. It's not surprising to read on George's blog, then, that at this point, the level of ignorance and ineptitude he had been faced with was a far greater motivator than the $72 they charged him. Per Andrea's instructions, George contacted Verizon once again through their online support forum, and the next day received this response. Here they reiterate that the pricing, which is wrong by a factor of 100, is in fact correct. For the time that he spent attempting to teach the Verizon employees basic mathematics, they give him half off his 100 times oversized bill. George is not satisfied and sends this reply. In this reply, George describes the mistake that was made and says how he has had great difficulty in explaining to the customer service reps that there is a difference between $0.002 and .002 cents. The other interesting thing he mentions is a suggestion that they would have a much more easily interpretable rate if they made it per megabyte instead of per kilobyte, Per megabyte, the rate would be a more normal number of $2.05. 2 days later, George receives another reply from Verizon. Now, still without acknowledging their mistake, aside from providing their actual correct rate, they give George a full refund. This is still unsatisfactory, though, since it's clear that Verizon doesn't understand basic math well enough to be involved in quoting and charging people any rate for anything. If it happened to George, it could happen to you. Sure enough, the very same day, December 10th, George posts again on his blog with a link to a recent post on a home theater forum where someone has had this exact same issue. This is an unfortunate fellow named Peter, and he describes the same exact difficulty. And he mentions that Verizon seems to have an endless supply of mathematically challenged employees. The next day, Monday, December 11th, George finally receives a response from Verizon where they admit their mistake. Sure, Verizon was overcharging their customers 100-fold, but at least it wouldn't happen again. 3 days later, on December 14th, 2006, this phone call from the same day was posted to YouTube.
Good. The other thing is, once in a while I travel to Canada, and I was wondering, is that still unlimited, or?
Well, it's gonna be, no. It's gonna be 0.002 per kilobyte of access. 0.002 per kilobyte.
Okay, is that cents or dollars?
Cents.
Cents, okay.
Yeah, cents.
So it's 0.002 cents.
It's actually 0.002.
0.002 cents.
Cents per kilobyte.
Cents, okay, 0.002 cents per kilobyte.
Yeah.
Okay, I got it right.
In 10 days, George's blog was visited over 220,000 times, and his situation went viral. On December 9th, 2006, Consumerist.com posted the audio of George's phone call to YouTube, and it became the top-rated post that day, and the top-rated of the month in the news and blogs category, with over 360,000 views. It was covered all over the web: Wall Street Journal, Reddit, MSNBC, a Harvard professor of economics, and more. There was a remix contest, a t-shirt contest, and at some point in early 2007, Verizon conceded to George's advice and finally began quoting the Canadian roaming rate as $2.05 per megabyte. Even Peter from the home theater forums finally had his situation resolved in early 2007. This was really the onset of the internet age we know today. It was when the people, for the first time in some way, had the power. A company could scam their customers, purposefully or not, and be held accountable in front of hundreds of thousands of people. They could be inundated with complaints and explanations of their error. People the world over, for a moment, could come together to point and laugh. Through the experiences and creativity of real people, with Reddit, YouTube, MySpace, Facebook, and Wikipedia, all existing for over a year at this point, user-generated content would prove to be the greatest asset the internet had. It was fitting then that on Christmas Day 2006, Time magazine named the Person of the Year you, or us. Now, almost 20 years later, it can't be said that everyone has got a lot better at math, but hey, at least we still have the internet, right?
Hey babe, my day's just starting to wake up, but it's already brighter knowing you're here. Just chilling in my little black dress, thinking about taking a cuddle.
Subscribe to Wrath of Math for the swankiest math videos on the internet.